Breaking: DNA evidence was recovered from 2005 Vern Braswell Murder Case, contrary to what prosecutor told the jury. Trial prosecutor told jury there was no DNA evidence present. However, photos and a newly discovered 2005 DNA report clearly showed that there was DNA evidence present and recovered, and it did not match convicted defendant, Vern Braswell.
A copy of a 2005 DNA report has surfaced that proves Vern Braswell was likely innocent of the murder he was convicted of over 16 years ago, when Vern Braswell received evidence which had been stolen from his appeal court files over 15 years ago, accompanied by an anonymous letter of apology. In July of 2020, family members initiated a reinvestigation into Vern's murder conviction. Their efforts uncovered autopsy photos and a 2005 DNA report that proves Vern's conviction was very likely a tragic miscarriage of justice that stemmed from the 2004 death of his wife. Family members also concluded that the way prosecutors addressed the jury about this DNA evidence appears to be sinister and unethical. Here's what the trial prosecutor, and now head DAG, Amy Weirich, told the jury about the death, and about the DNA evidence. Prosecutor Weirich told the jury that Vern choked his wife against a wall, and while this was happening, she was scratching him. Weirich then told the jury that there was no evidence present, including Vern's DNA, under his wife's fingernails because it washed away. Amy Weirich knew this was not true. She knew that DNA was present and recovered from under the wife's fingernails. Amy Weirich also knew the recovered DNA did not belong to Vern. Amy Weirich also knew that, following Sheila's death, Vern did not have one single scratch anywhere on his body. Consequently, the DNA recovered from under the wife's fingernails and submitted for testing did not match Vern, and it should have led to a dismissal of the charges over 16 years ago when prosecutors received the report in 2005. Apparently, the anonymous letter of apology included with the Braswell character letters that were stolen from the court record was accurate. This appears to be evidence of innocence from Vern's case that was disregarded. Amy Weirich's inaccurate statements to the jury helped to cover it up. The family's position is that Vern Braswell's conviction should be thrown out immediately. Family members also believe that unedited versions of police notes, as well as the evidence from the sealed envelope discovered in the prosecution's files in 2011, likely concealed the identity of the person whose DNA was recovered from under Sheila's fingernails, and whom, based on scientific evidence, would have been the last person to have an interaction with the wife before she died. When police and prosecutors realized this, there's no evidence nor indication that they said, "Let's see if we can figure out who the person is that this recovered DNA belongs to." Perhaps they already knew and didn't want their case ruined. When police and prosecutors realized this, there's no evidence nor indication that they called witnesses back into their offices, to try to figure out who the person is that this recovered DNA belongs to. Perhaps they already knew and didn't want their case ruined. When police and prosecutors realized this, they did not go to Vern's lawyers to say your client is cleared. Perhaps they didn't want their case ruined. So what did they do? Amy Weirich told the jury that there was no evidence under the fingernails of Sheila when Weirich knew that there was DNA present and recovered from under the fingernails, that it was not Vern's and should have led to the dismissal of the murder charge against him. This DAG drops charges against white men that sexually exposed themselves to little children. This DAG allows white men who rape girls to do 6 months of jail time on the weekends. When DNA excludes white men, the charges get dropped. When DNA excludes a black man, the strategy appears to be, let's see if we can convict him anyway. The science says the last person to interact with Sheila, prior to her death, was not Vern Braswell. The charges should have been dropped over 16 years ago. The charges should be dropped now, and Vern Braswell should be released immediately.